Hi, welcome to Pose Breakdown. Looking at Warrior 2 and Warrior 1 today. So if you're just getting started in your yoga practice, or maybe you've been to a few classes, sometimes these poses can seem really similar, which can be a bit confusing. So just going through these poses with you today to give you an idea of the alignment and where your body needs to be, and also the different options that are available to help it feel good for you. So let's start off with Warrior 1. So in Warrior 1, if you're coming from standing, so we'll do that today, coming from standing. So if you're taking a big step back with the right foot, so allowing the right foot to come flat to the ground. So it may be that the foot's parallel with the end of the mat, or it may be that the toes are kind of slightly in, whatever feels good for you. And then bending into that front knee, so knees sort of over the ankle, and getting a feeling of the knee being open. So if you notice it's caving in a little bit, seeing if you can open it towards the little toe edge of that front foot. Now the stance in Warrior 1 can be as long or as short as feels good for you. So there's no sort of right or wrong in this pose. So you can go for a super long stance so the hips are quite low, or it can be quite a short stance. So wherever you are, just checking that the knee is over the ankle. But don't worry too much about where it should or shouldn't be. There's really not a right or wrong. We've all got very different bodies. So it's about feeling into what feels stable and comfortable for you. I'd suggest that you maybe allow the feet to be at least sort of hips width apart and maybe wider. And the reason for this is that in Warrior 1, the hips actually are facing the front of the mat. So if the feet are kind of too close together, you'll find there really isn't a lot of space for the hips to face the front of the mat. Some people's bodies are able to do it, but for most people, you're potentially going to end up trapping something or irritating something in the hips. So keeping a nice wide stance, that'll give space for the hips to come forward more comfortably. Now we've all got different bodies and our hips are all different, and in some bodies it's just not going to feel good to be in this position facing forward. And if you're feeling that in your body as you've just moved your hips forward right now, then what I'd suggest is, instead of coming up into Warrior 1, that whenever that's suggested in a class, that you come into a high lunge instead. So you lift up the back heel off the ground, and then that will bring the hips forward. And you can see that there isn't actually a huge amount of difference here. The hips are forward, still got the bend in the front knee, but it's just the heels lifted. So that's a really good alternative if you're ever in Warrior 1 and you're feeling actually this is tweaking, this is uncomfortable. No yoga pose should ever feel uncomfortable or tweaky. So if it feels like that for you, please do take the heel up at the back, come into high lunge. That's a completely acceptable and really good alternative. So if you are staying in Warrior 1, then bending into the front knee, back foot is flat, hips are facing forward. And then seeing if the shoulders can be over the hips. So maybe just noticing if you're leaning forwards or leaning back. So seeing if there can be a sort of a shoulder over the hip feeling here. And then as you inhale, lifting the arms upwards and fingertips reaching up to the sky. So the palms are facing inwards towards each other as you're reaching up. And maybe the arms are sort of by the ear if your shoulders are feeling really open. But again, if your shoulders are feeling tight, it's completely okay to have the arms a bit further forward. So there can be this view of poses needing to look a certain way. It's so much better to do yoga in a way that feels good for your body. So taking the arms up to wherever feels good. Maybe it's straight up ahead, maybe it's slightly forward, or maybe you even bring them into a slightly wider Y shape. So that's Warrior 1 there. So both feet are grounded down, hips are forward in Warrior 1, arms up. Okay, let's have a little look at Warrior 2. So in Warrior 2, same kind of idea with the feet, stepping back foot grounded. It can either be parallel with the back of the mat or the toes can be slightly in. Bending into the front knee. And again, lots of options here with taking a wider or a shorter stance. Sometimes it's easier to take a slightly wider stance in Warrior 2 than you did in Warrior 1. But you can absolutely take Warrior 2 with the feet closer together. And again, up to you how wide apart you take your feet. Some people like to have their feet completely in line, but for most of us, having a little bit of space provides that openness in the hips, feels really good. So bending into that front knee again, knee over the ankle. And then we move up to the hips. So the difference in Warrior 2 is that the hips face the side of the mat. So instead of coming forwards to the front, they're open to the side. So this tends to be a more comfortable position for most people's hips than Warrior 1. The hips are used to being open in this way, and it feels quite good. It tends not to be as tweaky. So hopefully if Warrior 1 didn't feel good, that Warrior 2 will feel a bit better. And then the arms, instead of rising up in front, one arm rises to the front of the mat and the other arm reaches to the back. So again, shoulders over hips. So sometimes in Warrior 2 in particular, it can feel tempting to reach forward. So allowing yourself to be nice and centered. So here, if your left foot's at the front, it's the left hand reaching forward, right foot at the back, right hand reaching backwards. Palms are facing down and fingertips are really actively reaching away from each other. So getting a feeling of reaching out as wide as you can. If you sense the shoulders are creeping up a little bit, which for a lot of us they do because shoulders get very tight, then what you can do is you can turn the palms up to the ceiling. Exhale, let the shoulders come down. And then just rotate at the wrists. And that will help you keep the shoulders down a little bit. So option here if you want to bring the gaze over the front fingers, or you can have the gaze wherever feels good. But it's an option if you want to, if that feels nice. So that's Warrior 2. So same idea with the feet. Hips facing the side instead of the front. And then arms also open up to the side. So to the front and the back of the mat, reaching out, palms facing down. So hopefully that kind of helps it feel a little bit clearer which one is which. So just to recap, Warrior 1, both feet are grounded, front foot is always facing forward in both warriors, bending into the front knee in both warriors. So you've got the same kind of idea of your grounding. Warrior 1, hips facing forward, can come into high lunge if that feels better for the hips. Arms reach up and overhead. In Warrior 2, hips facing to the side of the mat, arms reaching out to the front and the back, palms facing down. So have a little play around with those, see which poses feel good for you. With Warrior 1, if it does feel better to go for high lunge, hopefully that feels like a really good alternative. So feel free to take that at any time if you're getting any tweaking or any discomfort in your hips, or you know that your hips already maybe don't feel very good. So yeah, that's Warrior 1 and Warrior 2. Hope that felt really helpful and look forward to seeing you in another pose breakdown soon.